Leaning Tower of video, let's go. Alright, I want to make a video about postmodernism. And I read this article, but it turned out to be really freaking crazy. It went in all different directions. So, I'm probably going to go in all different directions too. I'm going to be a schizophrenic with this article. It's funny because this article is mostly about schizophrenia, but it was written like by a schizophrenic. Because they're jumping between two different points that basically agree. There was this one, okay, so basically this one article that they are referencing in the book called Postmodernism and Consumer Society. They compare that with another article by Deleuze and Guattari, Anti-Oedipus. And he named the Anti-Oedipus against this one article, which is just ridiculous because this one article only mentions ego like a few times. It's just like, yeah, well, people really can't really form an ego, can they, if they're just bombarded with messaging and ads. And this article just basically, that was refuting it, just said, yeah, we agree. I mean, it can't be, with all these ads and stuff, we agree that everybody's schizophrenic, but can you really be pro-Freud? And this article wasn't pro-Freud. And it's just like, Freud's just a boogeyman in the psychology community. It's crazy. Even though he was probably the best psychologist that there ever was. It's because people can't understand where he was going with his work. So, this article basically insists that we are schizophrenic either way, and I get that. Because people need a language center, they need to develop an ego, they need to develop an I, me, and they need to develop that, like, truthfully to themselves. And they can't possibly do that when they're constantly thinking about, oh, this could be me, this could be me, this could be me. And that's what ads are trying to do. They're trying to take your ego and trying to warp it into something that's not you, and they try to attract you into that. So that's basically the main claim of the first article. The second article is just like, oh, how could you be that much a supporter of Freud? I think that capitalism is not really the problem. It's going to happen either way. Either way, we're going to have postmodernism where we just redefine words constantly because what else are we going to do these days? And the main authors are like, pretty much, yeah, I agree, but like, fuck Freud. And it's just ridiculous how these people like argue back and forth despite agreeing on like 90% of what they're saying. And my friend also sent me this other article that was about postmodernism and about how postmodernism is kind of a response to the failed attempt at identity formation in the 90s. Because if you look at like history, there's always been certain groups, there's always been a certain way to identify yourself. And I don't mean like the way they want you to identify yourself right now. Like, oh, I'm a white man. I identify myself as a white man who's straight. And, you know, that's not exactly what the groups were before. Before there were groups that were forming based on ego. Like, you knew who you were, you knew which group you were a part of. Just because that's how you felt. You felt similar to other people. Like, naturally you felt similar to other people. No ads, everything cut off. Groups would form, and there were some groups that were pretty awesome, like back in the days. But right now, we just have an identity crisis. Nobody really has an identity. They don't know what they stand for. They're constantly they're constantly malleable, and people look at this as a virtue. People look at it as a virtue to be constantly malleable and never stand for anything, because you're not open-minded if you don't stand for anything. So, the problem is that both of these authors are right, and despite trying to disagree, like, we all have become a little bit schizophrenic, and we get in touch with our schizophrenic side a little bit. There was this one author that, actually one of them was a little bit pro-schizophrenia, because one of them said that Freud's stupid tactics, I don't like Freud, but, like, his stupid tactics couldn't work on a schizophrenic, because they're atheists, they don't think about anything that has to do with, like, culture or everything, they just go with the flow constantly, so they can never be programmed. And that is true. But I think schizophrenia, in the way that, like, we look at it today, is definitely programmable. It's because of the programming that we have schizophrenia. And you might think that you're not schizophrenic, but you probably have schizophrenic aspects to you. I mean, look, with bombarded with ads constantly, you're a little bit schizo. You try to tune it out a little bit. You try to tune it out as much as you can, but eventually you are going to be people are going to be schizophrenic. And one of the articles just says that, late-stage capitalism is basically what's going to happen and cause people to be schizophrenic because of all these ads. Everybody's like trying to form a new identity constantly. They can't stay. It's like one of these articles that my friend sent me compared velocity to position. And nobody can really pick a position in their ego because it's always moving. There's always a velocity to it. So if something's constantly moving, there's no such thing as a position at the moment because you just slow down the frame of time and there's no position there. So that's part of being That's part of being a schizophrenic, not realizing that there is a certain time and everything's going crazy, and to think that that's a positive thing. I guess that's interesting, because it would be positive if you like were a true schizo and really didn't register. A lot of the societal pressures didn't really register with you with the society we have today, which is a society that like totally is very kind to children and gives you shots that you need, and like the media is totally open and all that stuff. It's great, but you know, being in society today, being a schizophrenic might be a little bit of a beneficial thing. But this article also insists that we need to move from postmodern capitalist schizophrenia to a sort of socialist schizophrenia. So a socialist schizophrenia would kind of be, I think it would have to be a lot more schizophrenic. Because the capitalist schizophrenia, at least you have your ideas and your ego based on something that's going on in the world. You have your ideas and your ego based on, you know, the ads that you see, the person that you want to be in time. If there was a socialist schizophrenia that formed, then it would just be schizophrenia. There wouldn't be like any motive or direction to it. It would just be like kind of craziness that's just like you do whatever the hell you want and just let the overlords rule you, which I think is in the direction that most people are going right now. But to talk a little bit more about postmodernism, what postmodernism is the changing of definitions. It is the, alright, so if you go outside and you see a tree, and it's called a tree, like, it could not really be a tree though. It's just this wood. So in fact, it might be a wood that causes carbon, so let's call it a carbon wood. And then if we want to actually cut it down, let's call it a dangerous carbon wood. I don't know. I'm out of my mind here. I'm the schizophrenic, but the point is that the definitions will constantly change under a state of schizophrenic postmodernism, which both of these authors agree that we're in. We don't really know what's going on, and we're constantly changing the definition of everything, the way we see everything. There's no such thing as reality anymore. And postmodernism is a big weapon to get people off of common sense. Like, we all have this common sense. People are so against us. Like, objective morality. People do not want to believe in objective morality. And that's how you combat postmodernism. It's like, no, we know this is a tree. Like, we've all agreed this is a tree. But that would be a bigoted statement, because maybe in some languages it's not a tree. So let's just let the government decide that for us. And postmodernism is being pushed by late-stage capitalism. Yeah, I'm not a huge capitalist. It's being pushed by late-stage capitalism by trying to have us redefine our entire identities constantly. And then what's going to happen is there's going to be a big takeover that they define everything for us, because we're so confused over everything, because you can't say anything is anything anymore. I sound like a boomer right now, but it's true. I mean, they literally changed the definition of woman. It's to protect trans people. No, I don't think so. I don't think they're changing the definition of vaccine to protect vaccines. To protect real vaccines, a lot of people trust vaccines, and now the definition has changed. I trust vaccines totally. So, anyways, let me know what you think about postmodernism, because it's really interesting to think that some people think that there's nothing is true, and we can redefine it based on our collective democratic ideology, rather than just what we all know to be true. It's funny that some people don't pretend to not know what truth is, when everybody does. So, anyways, see ya.